My name is Chad Sowash. I am the Chad part of the Chad and Cheese, HR's Most Dangerous podcast. Yesterday, okay, so Dave says he has a licensed psychologist, and then he's talking about llamas, and now he's got a podcast host coming out. I don't know how to take that. Luckily, today we have an all-star casted panel. Pulled together by our friends at Wade and Wendy. Big applause for Dave and team. Great minds and great content rolling into day 2, people. That's right, day 2. Llamas are coming. So first off, today we're going to talk about reshaping recruitment and automation and DEI. But first and foremost, I'd like to ask the panel for just some quick Twitter bios. So right out of the gate, Stacey Olive, she's VP of Talent Acquisition with the New York Times. Stacey, give us a little Twitter bio about you.
Yes. So I love a good debate. I love a good, back and forth conversation. You can literally say that on my Twitter account. Huge Game of Thrones fan, and I miss that, the good old days of having something to look forward to like that on a Sunday night. I miss it. And, a passionate, engaged mom, working mom. And so that's always part of my ethos. And I always bring that to what I do and the heart and soul of what I do. And I have a close to 20 years of recruiting experience under my belt, which I'm really, really proud of. I believe that when you're hiring people and recruiting, at its heart, you're doing good work. Recruitment is good work. So I'll leave it at that for now.
So quick question. Have you rewatched Game of Thrones during COVID?
Oh, no, not during COVID.
So many people have. Excellent. Next, we have Crystle Johnson. Crystle is the founder and CEO of the DEI Coach and also co-host of the We Are Meaningful podcast, which is awesome. I actually got a chance to listen to about half their episodes. You should check it out. Crystle, give us a little Twitter bio about you.
Oh, Twitter bios are always so hard. But good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm really looking forward to this panel today. I am an equity and inclusion consultant in the gaming industry. So in my work, I work really closely with different areas of the business, whether that be talent acquisition, talent management, marketing, et cetera, to help them to understand what their gap opportunities are. So we can create solutions that better our experience of our employees and our players and other key stakeholders. So again, really excited to be here today.
And gaming, another industry that has actually spiked during COVID, correct?
Yeah, we've been doing really well. And I'm really proud of the way that people have come together during the pandemic through gaming.
Excellent. Next on the docket, we have Jen Terry-Tharp, VP Global Strategy at Joveo. She's got a little bit more to tell about us. Jen, tell us a little bit, give us a little background about you.
Well, thank you, Chad. So before coming to Joveo, I've been here about 6 months. And Joveo, for those of you that don't know, is a programmatic job advertising platform that stands for Job for Everyone. And so I think that there's a lot of diversity and inclusion embedded in that. But before that, I spent 20 years leading talent acquisition for AT&T, and that included diversity and inclusion for talent acquisition, as well as technology and a few other things. I have to, for my Twitter bio, say the following 2 things. I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones. I've also never seen Star Wars in any iteration. The Baby Yoda thing, cute and all, lost on me. But in my spare time, I love junk reality TV, and I play a ton of super nerdy board games. So if anybody is into nerdy board games, I'm your girl.
Is there not a nerdy board game? I mean, it seems redundant, does it not?
Okay, Monopoly is way not my speed, Chad. I want to play with, Magic the Gathering and dress up and stuff. I'm a weird. I'm weird like that.
You won't do dragons on TV. Okay, Trent Cotton, everybody. We've got Trent Cotton, Director of Recruiting at BBVA in the U.S. Quick bio, Trent. Tell us a little bit about you. Where are you at, man?
I'm in Atlanta. So really kind of suffering. I am not, the whole Game of Thrones, Stacey, I'm there with you. I love it. But the whole winter is coming crap, that's usually where I just kind of sign off. I hate it being cold. I'm a Gulf Coast guy. That's where I grew up. So I like the beach. So I'm counting down the days until the time changes and the temperature changes. But yes, director of TA for BBVA. I've been in recruiting for 17 years now, converted to the dark side in 2004 after being a banker for kind of first part of my career. So I came from the line of business and came into HR and really didn't fit in for the first couple of years, but I think maybe I found my stride. I've been doing this 17 years. I've been 10 years with BBVA, and in my free time, I do a lot of writing for the blog and just really passionate about everything TA, diversity inclusion, the automation, methodologies to make it more efficient. So that way we can spend more time on what really matters, which is the people that we're working with, our hiring managers, and our candidates. And I definitely agree. I think Stacey, you said that this is important work. And so when we start talking about automation, that's kind of my focus is how can we get all the kind of get the crap out of the way so we can really focus on the important work. Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of the Chad Cheeseman podcast. I just have to do a plug. I figured that was okay, Chad, since you keep doing your mug in front of everyone so they can kind of see it. So I thought that I would just go ahead and kind of call it out.
Yes. Well, and last and very much the least, my name is Chad Sowash, husband, father, U.S. Army veteran, 20 plus years in the HR/TA space. Technology, I was actually with Monster before it was Monster, dating myself. I was in an RPO, built veteran hiring programs, worked with the federal government, state government, and Fortune 500 companies like Jen to build the nation's very first national labor exchange. And today, believe it or not, it's really surreal. I am the co-host of HR's Most Dangerous podcast, The Chad and Cheese. Go to chadcheese.com or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, today, the title and what we're going to be talking about is reshaping recruitment for automation and DEI. And we're going to throw some remote in there as well. Crystle, the first one's going to you. Are you ready?
What?
Okay, we're going to start out with a lightning round. So quick and easy answers. We'll dig in a little bit later. What do you believe we should be reshaping in recruiting and why?
So for me, I really think about the fact that it's not sustainable the way that we're doing the work right now. I think that we've all heard that we live in a microwave society. And I don't think that's any less true when we think about attracting and recruiting talent. And I think that for our organizations, we have to open up our minds, be flexible, and of course, start thinking outside the box. And also just address the fact that those things aren't mutually exclusive from making quality hires.
So would you say not sustainable and scalability are pretty much in the same conversation?
Yeah, I would totally agree. One of the things that really comes to mind for me is that I feel like a lot of employees are being recycled through companies. And we're not really thinking about growing talent internally or, again, thinking outside the box, because that's just a limited pool of people. So how do we expand the pool of people so there is more opportunity to grow talent and to be more innovative?
Excellent. So now, Jen, your thoughts. What do we reshape? What do we reshape in recruiting and why?
So I'm going to give a very direct thing that's like an actual thing we should all do when we hang up from this conference later today. And that is rethink our job advertisements, right? Like it is the beginning of everything and the end of hope. Right.
The foundation of everything. This is the data that we always talk about, right?
Right. And it's like it is the thing, and it has such a propensity to not promote diversity and inclusion. And it starts everything off just in a bad sort of, maybe not a bad, but not the best sort of way. And then I'll add to that as you look at every touch point, where is there value in a human and where is there expediency in a machine? Right? Like if we're going to really rethink, where do we add the most value as real people with hearts and minds?
Gotcha. Very nice. Okay. So Trent, question to you again, lightning round. Where or what do we reshape in recruiting and why?
Well, I agree 100% with Crystle that the way that recruiting has been set up is not scalable, it's not sustainable, and really it hasn't really evolved. Recently, about 2 years ago, we kind of identified 4 pitfalls of what we call traditional recruiting, which is recruiting how kind of most of us have done it. And we started applying some of the agile methodology to our recruiting processes to allow us to scale, to be more flexible, to be more client-centric, and to find efficiency. So that way we can start, I think, Jen, you kind of hit it on the head, to start spending time where it really matters, which is the people. Nice.
And Stacey, your turn. Lightning round. What do we reshape in recruiting?
Agreeing with all of my colleagues here on the panel, and to be additive to what's been said, I would say, creating in each our own way, in our own space, better interviewers that are able to really assess candidates in a much better way, because we've recently begun kind of, company-wide interview training. I'm really seeing the value and kind of what's lost. People dive into these meetings and these one-on-one interviews kind of with not enough forethought far too many times, and spending the time creating really good interviewers, understanding the core of how we're going to assess candidates and how we're going to make those decisions and those selections. Without that, we're not going to be able to, achieve those inclusivity, belonging, and equity goals that we all have.
So that being said, going back to the sustainable and scalability argument, I guess you could say, is interviewing has taken a big hit, and many platforms are really focusing on how to scale interviewing better. Do you utilize any type of technology to help you scale? All the training is great, but how do you scale all those people that are trying to get great jobs within your organization?
Yeah, that question is to me. Yeah. So I have to say, the technology that we use is a simple and reliable technology. I'm actually a fan of Google Hangouts, to be honest with you. We're on the G Suite, and I just think really keeping it simple and and then the training piece of it. So keeping it simple, testing ahead of time, does the technology work? And not forgetting about the human element through all of the great automation that we have. So, right now there are just so many choices. If we're having a problem with Google Hangout, you can always switch to Zoom. I think the technology has made all of our jobs easier to be able to focus on, training people. How do you make a connection with someone, even though you may hire them and never have met them? How do you assess someone? So no, we keep the technology. It works consistently, and it's simple, and it's something that is universal. And to me, that's the best thing we've done.
Well, in panel, I want you to jump in. This is a discussion. Don't wait for me to plug you at all. But I'm going to challenge you here, Stacey.
Yeah.
Are you recording those first and foremost? If you are, that's awesome. But it sounds like you're using multiple platforms. How does that feed into your core system? And if you're not, how do you audit? And how do you defend when the OFCCP comes knocking or EEOC comes knocking?
I totally want to take this one if Stacey doesn't care.
Go for it, Jen.
I totally want to take this one. So it's a really good point, Chad. And I think if you are recording them, you have to have some sort of technology in order to put that into some sort of system of record, right? For all of those reasons. But the reality is, we don't record telephone conversations and we take notes and make decisions on that. I look at video, right? Well, I don't think so, right? Honestly, from a compliance perspective, you're sort of better to just have notes, right? Anybody who's ever been through an OFCCP audit knows that. So I would just I have always suggested that we look at the method of video interviewing much like we do a phone interview. And there's a difference between that and something that is pre-recorded and evaluated, not in real time. My 2 cents.
And Chad, I think, you bring up a point, of course, whenever you asked about the whole record, I got the acid reflux that I call OFCCP EEOC. But, the kind of the flip side of that is, I think, one of the things that we've started trying to do as we continue to find efficiencies is do a postmortem. So we look at the quick quits. So who left within the first 90, 120, 180 days, and to be able to have something to go back to, and as the interviewers, like our hiring partners and the recruiters, and go, okay, what did we miss? And sometimes, the people being interviewed are really, really good salespeople. We wouldn't have known. But I do think that there are times, Stacey, getting back to your training of, really digging into the interview and said, okay, Mr. and Miss Hiring Manager, you did a great 45-minute interview. We know that they like dogs, long walks on the beach, and their favorite color is purple, but you didn't really assess whether or not are they a good cultural fit. Do they have the technical skills? And more importantly, this person that you're interviewing today, where do you see them in the next 1 to 5 years with the company? And if you can't see them, pass. So I guess for me is looking at how can we enable technology to be able to safely and fairly be able to go back and do that post audit to make sure that we continue to refine that process. Training an interview is great, but sometimes you really need to kind of be able to present the data to the manager and say, okay, you're being an idiot. You're hiring the same person and they're not working out every 6 months. Can we try and change this, this idiocracy that we're going through,
Exactly.
Yeah, so I would actually add a couple of things here. So the first thing is that when we hire, it's really important that instead of looking for culture fit, we look for people that are going to add to our culture. So that's super important, because when we say culture fit, it means, as you mentioned, you're hiring the same person over and over and over again because you feel like that person would be a fit for the existing culture. One of the things that you said, I think is super important when it comes to like these touch points throughout the process. So for us, we have touch points at the very beginning. So if a hiring manager says, hey, Crystle, I want to open this role for X, Y, and Z on my team, they have to have a conversation with the recruiter about what is it that this person will actually need to do this job, and what are the things that are nice to have. And that recruiter holds them accountable throughout the entire process. And when we think about technology, we actually use a system called Tap Recruit, which is much like, I can't remember the name of the software that was created to help with job descriptions at the moment. It's escaping me. Textio, yes. So Tap Recruit is much like Textio, and it uses a lot of psychology in the background and data around what words should we use to make this job description neutral, not leaning towards women or leaning towards men. How do we have it right in the middle and keep it so much so neutral that everyone would want to apply? So not using words like rock star, for example. And then when we think about wrapping up the process, giving people the opportunity to add feedback into a system so that feedback is recorded. So it's not in your personal notes on your computer, your personal notes in your notebook, but it's actually in a system, and ensuring that every person in the process who's part of the interviewing panel has a certain topic that they're interviewing for. So are you interviewing about someone's feelings around inclusion and diversity or culture? Are you interviewing for technical skills? Are you interviewing for change management skills? So your feedback should really be focused on that and not any other, competency or topic. And it kind of just helps people to stay in their swim lanes and keep the process as objective as possible.
Gotcha.
And Crystle, I think too that the intake conversation, in my mind, that's where you bring in the DEI conversation. I mean, the recruiter should be looking at their HR analytic tool and looking at the team and saying, okay, is there an opportunity for us to widen the pool even more than we're supposed to from an underrepresented group? And if so, then let's bring in, if you've got a recruiter that specializes or their primary responsibility is that recruiting in the underrepresented group, bring them in on the intake. And then that way it's top of mind for the manager, because a lot of times, to your point, the managers just kind of look and they're like, this is an open role, I'm losing revenue, or I'm trying to mitigate risk with this open role, it's not in their mindset to think about D&I. But if the recruiter comes in and says, okay, let's talk about the job, but now let's also talk about your team makeup. So I know your technical skills and everything that you're wanting, but we also need to address that, you're trying to build a product and you've got all the people that look just like each other. You need some other diversity of thought and diversity of background and everything at the table, because it's the right thing to do. Where are some areas that we can go in and find that talent and leverage them in that process? That's something that we've begun to do, leveraging, we use Visier for our HR analytics. And so we can drill down almost to like cost center and look at not just the current, but also what is the trend been? So we can kind of make sure that is top of mind and make sure that we're honoring our commitment to do the right thing.
Right. So Stacey, on scale, what are you guys doing? Obviously, as you evolve, not just training, but the process methodology, what are you doing to scale better?
Yeah. So, we've in the past, I want to say 2 years, scaling has become a really kind of front and center issue for us. We're our company, the New York Times, we're in a growth mode, and there's so many exciting things happening that finding spaces where, let's say, for instance, a particular division, says they know they need to hire 180 people in 2021. And so you need to find those pockets where you have similar jobs and similar candidates and create processes that we've called it in the past an always on hiring process. So you understand, who are your staple interview panelists? They go through, they get trained and they understand the requirements of all the jobs. You block time on everyone's calendar every week. So you've got, 5 to 6 candidates that they're meeting with, and they know what's happening every single week. And you create repeatable processes so that not everything feels like each hire and each offer is like you're giving birth. Each hire and each offer. I love to use that analogy. I've got to inject some humor. No, but you really have to find repeatable, scalable processes, consistent competencies and skills, and training so that everyone's on the same page. They know what the job is consistently. And I think there's a lot of satisfaction for the people who are spending their time at the company interviewing, because guess what? They get really good at it. They get incredibly good at interviewing. So if you're asking the same question to 6 people, you get to know what is a really great answer to this question. What elements, make a good answer. And so I would say, scaling for us overall has just finding those places where, I don't want to use the word fungibility, but there's fungibility within the jobs, fungibility perhaps within the candidate, candidates, the pool of candidates you're considering. So you can really plug and play and hopefully make 4 offers a week, 10 offers a week, and really find that you're not going to have that. That's not the case in every case. But in order to scale, you must find those pockets and those places. So I think that's what's worked for us.
Routine and process. So I'm going to pivot back to what Jen was talking about, because I think it's one of the most important pieces of data that I want to say that talent acquisition and recruiting has just forgotten about. We've allowed to atrophy and become 20-year-old job descriptions, right? We're talking about the job description. We're talking about something that could easily negatively impact DEI efforts, not to mention to really provide that not culture fit, but the type of individual that you want in to provide more to that cultural recipe, right? So Jen, when you talk about that, knowing that, with Joveo now, you guys are driving off of that data. What are you seeing? And again, from the DEI aspect, what needs to change?
Super great question. So the first thing is, in the past, and we can call it the print days, but the reality is it was just yesterday, right? Like we can say it was a long time ago, but it's now. And what we're doing is we are using job descriptions as digital pieces of marketing. And so where in the past we might have just the only place you would have looked at a job description is when you filled out the paper application. But now it really is almost always it's the first and sometimes the only thing an applicant sees about your role. And so using those directive and almost OSHA language around job roles, not only does it disenfranchise, quite honestly, some gender things and some things along those lines, it does a job of setting up why someone should want to do the work, which, as I've listened to all of us talk, right, like we've talked about anchoring people and reducing turnover and finding good additive fit and all of those things. So when you're just sort of putting out a laundry list, it often tends to be masculine and it tends to be very task driven. And so by using alternative job briefs or using something like a Get Optimal or Textio, or there's others out there, you can really not only make the job be less gender specific, right? Like don't do things like drives for results. I know that sounds so crazy. Everybody should want to drive for results, but drive is one of the most masculine words you could ever use in a job description, right? And so in addition to some of those things, just generally making the job brief compelling makes a difference in who's interested.
So what about, requirements themselves? Now that there's only so much text you can do, right? So being able to actually come back to the management staff and talk about what's really necessary, because we have requirements for things in these jobs that are just ridiculous. And I think for the most part, when we have a ton of job seekers coming in and we have a job seeker, let's say heavy market, what we do is we add those requirements in to be able to filter them out right out of the gate. Right.
Yep.
And then there's that contraction and expansion in the market, but yet we don't change that data. So Crystle, to you, have you seen this? And is it a part of your DEI efforts to actually look at that base information, because those are the individuals that you're losing right out of the gate?
Yeah, totally. So as I mentioned before, at our company, there's actually a conversation at the beginning between the hiring manager, between the recruiter, and then even senior leaders will get involved as well. When we kicked off this process, which we call the Great Hiring Process, we wanted to make sure that senior leaders and executives had visibility to what was going on with hiring in their business units, because we do a lot of tracking information around representation. Who are we hiring? Who's leaving out of the window? Who's progressing? And how high is attrition across these different groups? So in having that conversation, one of the foundational pieces of that conversation is, what is a nice to have that you have listed in all of these requirements? And what are the things that are required? And what I love is that they've been able to create this level of trust with one another. And the recruiter feels empowered to say, hey, Chad, I don't think that for this entry level role, you need to say that this person needs to have 15 years of experience or 10 years of experience, but it's an entry level role and you're only going to pay them $50,000.
Yeah.
And I would say that, job seekers are getting smart too. Like if you are active on LinkedIn, there's so many people who are calling organizations out saying that you're hiring for this entry level role. You want me to have 10 to 15 years of experience. There are things in there like, you need to come from I don't know what it said. I think it said a reputable university or institution. Like there are so many things.
What does that mean?
In these job descriptions, right? What does that even mean? That are in these job descriptions, that it really does require the organization really taking a reflective look and holding up the mirror to say, are we really driving for equity when we look at our job descriptions and what we're saying is required to do this job?
If I could add something to that too, Crystle, one thing that that we're starting now, and we've done in some pockets, but starting more company-wide now, is a specific exercise called role scoping. And so with that, what you do is you start with that vision of success. So a job description is a job description, and it's got the requirements and the qualifications. But when you ask the manager to define success in the role for you, then you work backwards from there And you say like, okay, so if that's what success looks like, what are the skills to get you there? To me, those are the core competencies that you really do want to focus your time and attention vetting for, as well. And so, and then as we all know, in a given, division or department where you might work, there might just be core qualities that you always need to vet for. So everyone who's a marketer in this division has to pass this, analytical exercise. That's an objective exercise. Or everyone has to have a collaborative team spirit and pitch in on things. And we ask interview questions around there. Those are things you can always standardize. But, to me, role scoping and competencies kind of start from, what does really success look like? If I can imagine this person doing an amazing job in their work backwards from that and pull out the skills that it's going to take to get there. So that's one thing we're working through with a lot of our teams now.
Is it hard not to personify something like that, though? Because Bob over there is great at what he's doing, and we want another Bob. But Bob's been in the position for 15 years, and you really don't need to be as experienced as Bob to do the job. Do you find it hard that when you start to scope it, that because we're humans, we know what an A person looks like in our organization. That's what we want every single time, but that doesn't mean that's what's required for the job. How hard is it for you to start to kind of say, okay, I totally understand that. How do we actually see what is necessary for the role so that we can have real requirements?
Yeah, that's really why we work and we advise and consult with teams, because it's just as hard to do that as it is for anyone to check their unconscious bias at the door. And so we all have versions of, people that you think are great at their job and that you want them to be the bar. Is that fair? So that's why, as Crystle was saying, there is that kickoff meeting, there is that discussion, but you advise and consult and you understand, what is the objective bar? To me, that question kind of leads to a further discussion on bias that you might have. Familiarity bias, association bias, all of those things that can creep in to different parts of the process, including at the very beginning.
Right. So, Trent, do you take your red marker into all those intake meetings?
Yeah. I have a big red marker and a stick. So that way when they give the wrong answer, it's, I don't believe in the carrot and the stick. It's the red marker and the stick. But I do agree. I think Crystle nailed it. It is positioning the recruiter where they are partners and they have that credibility and, more importantly, that empowerment to push back. So, Stacey was talking through the kind of the role scoping. And Crystle, I do feel like you were kind of picking on me a little bit about the whole entry level. We're going to pay them $50,000, but they need 80 years of experience, because that's the conversation I have all the time. But I do think that it starts with positioning recruiters as talent advisors versus just someone that just, hey, find me the person and let me run them through our ATS and then hire them. Whenever you position yourself truly as that advisor, you have everything that Jen and Crystle and Stacey talked about, and you don't necessarily need the stick, because then the managers are coming to you almost like they would go to a doctor and say, here are the symptoms, here are some of the things that I think that I need. What is your professional opinion? And then they shut up and then they listen, and then they actually follow the advice. So I do think that, it really sucks being on this panel. I mean, these three ladies are like killing it, and I'm just sitting here like sucking my thumb. But I do think that it's kind of a collective. If you're new to recruiting, or if you're just assumed a leader, I think taking everything from this last question, and that is just the fantastic start of building a very, very powerful hiring and recruiting strategy.
Yeah, I think there's the necessary foundational data of which you are hiring everybody off of. When everybody comes, like as Jen had said, comes from that job description or that crappy job posting that you put out there. Jen, real quick, I gotta pivot.
Okay, I just want to answer the questions from the chat. So just a couple of things on job description. Should you include physical requirements so they know if they need to ask for an accommodation? Absolutely, and you should tell them how to ask for the accommodation right where you put the requirements. Agree with that, Chad? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing is ERGs and advertising and showcasing that more than just disabilities and race. I think ERGs is a perfect example, and always use real employees. If you can link out to them from the job description and say, here are our employees in action, always a good proof point.
Outcomes and retention. Outcomes is demonstrated through these opportunities with the ERGs or BRGs, whatever you want to call them, and then the retention rates themselves. I'm going to hurry up. I'm going to pivot over to tech because I'm sure we'll talk more about outcomes, which is what we need to focus on a little bit later. Trent, going into the automation side of the house, there's no question, we have to scale. The way that we scale, we can't just get in and hire more people to scale because that takes forever. We need to automate. Where do we automate? How do we automate? And how do we do that with this prospective crappy ATS that everybody hates?
Well, yeah. Well, can we just say that the ATSs are built with the process in mind, not our clients, which are the candidates and the managers. So, when we find an ATS that actually reverses that, I think we'll all be golden. But as I'm looking at AI and machine learning, I get really excited about this kind of stuff. If you look at where the process is bogged down from a recruiter standpoint, it's on the front and the back end. And I'm not doing a plug or anything, but I have a major crush on Wade and Wendy. I love how products like that engage and help source, and they help evaluate. They serve them up to the recruiter so the recruiter can spend that time that they need to doing all the things that we've already talked about previously on the panel. And then once that candidate says, I do, that AI comes in and starts, chasing them down for the paperwork. There's a chat bot to answer any kind of questions about benefits or, the onboarding process. So that way the recruiter is just headlong focused on their client, on their hiring manager and their needs and their talent strategy, as well as kind of the candidate experience. And one of the things I've really been interested and impressed with the AI, especially on the front end, is the enhancement to the candidate experience. I can't tell you how many times I've called, for a search that I'm working, and I call and tell the person who interviewed, either I interviewed and or the manager interviewed, and let them know we chose somebody else. It is disheartening how many times they go, thank you for calling. I rarely get these kind of calls. Yeah. And that, to me, that is malpractice at the highest level in our industry. But I do understand that sometimes we just don't have the time because we're so busy chasing papers, making sure the right's right, going through all this other kind of stuff. So the automation part really, really jazzes me whenever we start talking about what can be taken off, and they're going to do it more efficiently. Now, one caveat, there's a tendency in HR especially, they go, oh, wow, cool new technology. They put it in place, but they never inspect what they expect. Yeah. And I think that, if you put something in, especially something that's sourcing and going out and bringing candidates in, getting back to our DEI conversation, you need to go back and audit it and make sure, whenever we built this thing, we did not unintentionally build in a bias. Is it doing what we need it to do? Is it going and bringing us the widest scale, both in number and experience level and background level of candidates that we need to be able to make sure that we're not cutting people out in the process. So, that is a concern, because I think, Jen, you were talking about OFCCP. Yes, I've been through them. I don't know what sin I committed, but I hope I enjoyed it, and I hope I never have to go through one again. But as you're looking at these AI and the machine learning tools, you need to have that in mind, and you really need to have a very strong pointed conversation with the vendor and say, do you know what this is doing and how often can we meet to review the results, and what kind of impact and influence can I have to make sure that if we're going the wrong way that we're able to course correct. So
Crystle, we had a little conversation about this. Every piece of technology that's coming out today is anti-bias, right? There's no bias in anything. And, the question to you is, how much fluff is that, and how real is it? How much of the all the responsibility really ends up on the employer anyway. But when you're evaluating technology, how do you take that in? How do you audit those types of things?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think that you have to, as the organization, understand the state of your organization. So when you're looking at your recruiting funnel, who's making it through the funnel, who's falling out? which parts of the process are people getting stuck? Like, you have to know the state of your organization. You have to know where your gaps and opportunities are. And you really have to know what you're trying to achieve. Because if you don't understand what you're trying to achieve and you don't know what your aspirations are, any company could come in and say, we will give you the world right here on a silver platter. And you might say, great, everything looks good. It looks fascinating. It looks like an easy button that I can press. But you have to be grounded in your why and what you're trying to achieve. And then, as Trent mentioned, being able to go on the back end to check in to say, okay, I know that I said I wanted to achieve this. How have I been successful at achieving those goals? What's holding me back? Is there any ability for me to reconnect with the vendor to make some shifts? Or is this not the right vendor for us?
And Chad, I think it gets back, I love Agile. So in the stand-up meetings that the team and I have, we talk about the same thing all the time. What worked, what didn't, and what are the obstacles? And I think that whenever you're evaluating anything in the talent acquisition process, whether it's a process, a service, interaction with the managers, or the technology that's being used, those same three questions can be applied. And I think it gets down to, a very succinct answer set that you can balance, to Crystle's point, balance against your why and say, how far off are we? Mm-hmm. And do that frequent, do it and be completely raw about it. I think sometimes in HR, we kind of dance around the bush. Some of this stuff, you can't dance around the bush. You've got to just say, we are being despairing against this underrepresented group, or we're not reaching these candidates on their field. How do we fix that? So I think that, applying that 3-question module to any part of the recruiting process is going to do nothing but continue to help innovate and iterate and then accelerate your recruiting strategies and processes.
Gotcha.
Totally. And there is no easy button, friends.
Yeah. No silver bullet, no easy button. It's hard work. Yes. Stacey, what's your
and God bless the poor vendor that calls me and says, "Hey, this is easy," because they're gonna meet the mean side of me going, "Don't BS me within the first 5 minutes of the conversation. Just show me what you got." Yeah, right. And I'm like, okay, this is not going well. It's like a bad date.
Yeah. Stacey, what's your favorite automation that you've actually put in within your system to be able to help, again, scale, process, those types of things?
Yes. Oh, my favorite has to be TapRecruit. We use TapRecruit, and it's shared in all of our materials company-wide. I've received a great deal of just positive feedback, and I really like that. It's such a tool that's holistic, and it helps the recruiter. So managers can go in and look at their job description, so what other companies are also hiring for a role like this. When you look at TapRecruit, it not only tries to take away terms that feel gendered, but anything that people just won't respond back to. So it's holistic. It makes our job descriptions better by eliminating, the trap of corporate speak that sometimes you tend to fall into, using those words we probably all hate, but we use them sometimes anyway. TapRecruit has been just, a very, very big hit for the Times company-wide.
Excellent. Jen, this is a fun conversation. Jen and I have this conversation probably far too often. So we talk about the tech stack, and Trent actually talked about the bright and shiny as we just start to add features onto our technology, and we have redundancy, we have these issues. I mean, it's feature bloat. It's just ridiculous. But the one thing that pretty much all of talent acquisition hates is their applicant tracking system, except you don't. You at AT&T.
I love applicant tracking systems. They're amazing. So me and Chad argue about this all the time, because and I'm not throwing shade, but I think that lots of times it's not easy to use an ATS. It's clunky, right? And the reality is I've used and consulted on people that use all different times, Taleo, Workday, blah, 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 blah. The reality is it is something that everybody uses to record their actions, and something that has all the data you need to automate right? It has everything in it. So when
it's more of a database than it is really a great experience, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, like, I'm gonna throw a shout out to my AT&T crew here. We used the Taleo application and we had a 90% application completion rate. I've never seen anybody with one so high. Right? It isn't about the backbone. It's about how you use the functionality of the backbone. And so this is mine and Chad's conversation always. And I appreciate automation and good plugins that do things like really good scheduling and all of those things. But the reality is, if you go in with the thought process that you are going to create a fair process with ways for contacting questions, and you are going to be as respectful of your candidate's time as you can, if you start there and then you add on to that, I also want to be respectful of my recruiter's time, and I don't want the candidate experience to suffer if my recruiters are busy. ATSs are great. You can make them do things like, this candidate's been sitting for 3 days without contact, send them a keep warm email, right? Like, all of those things are done on the backbone of the data in your ATS. And although all the other things are great, like, if you haven't started there, at least do that, right?
Yeah. And I think, again, we take a look at technology and we're looking, as Crystle had said, for the easy button in that silver bullet and whatnot. And it doesn't exist. One of the things we also do in TA is we try to do things that is not around our expertise, whether it's branding in some cases, design. This is all about design, right? This is about being able to ensure that your process methodology is, you had a great example of how you went to 90% because you changed the application process. Now you could do that because you were in charge at TA. But what did you do to actually change it to go from whatever percentage to that 90% that you're talking about?
So in every ATS, there's this little asterisk that's like required information that doesn't really matter, right? We looked at the data and found that 80% of our drop-off was because a resume was required for a job that was entry level and had no need for a resume. Customer service or retail, right? Like, you don't really need a resume there. And education. Right? All of these, did you spell the college right and all of that? Well, the reality is, if you're really looking at equity, education is a limiter, right? Like, experience and knowledge and ability is what matters. And so when you start putting in arbitrary education things and people try to match them, they're just dropping off and they never come back. Those two things took care of almost 70% of the drop off. Not requiring a resume for positions that don't really need one, and eliminating education requirements unless it was literally a requirement of the job, like attorneys and IO psychologists, not project managers.
Right. So we're going to land this plane. And by doing that, I want to be able to ask the quick question. First, Crystle, how easy would it be to go to your organization and actually do what Jen just said? Get rid of some of those required fields.
I would say in my organization, it's easy. And it's easy because we have very close relationships across centers of excellence. So all teams that are involved as key stakeholders during the talent acquisition or recruiting process are all connecting with one another often. And we're all trying to achieve the same goal. So it would be quite easy to say, if the data is telling us that this is where people are dropping off, then we would be able to make that change, because I don't go anywhere without data. And we make all decisions based on quantitative and qualitative data.
Excellent. Trent, how about you? You just get in there into the back end and change it yourself?
No, because apparently I don't have access to those. I have a little bit of a temper, so whenever somebody ticks me off, I have a tendency to go in there and do things I'm not supposed to. So they've limited my access. No, and Crystle, we have on our team we use William Dennings, and God we trust. Everyone else must bring data. So I agree completely. I love the thought, Jen. I'm like sitting here going, okay, I wonder where we drop off. So as far as the ease, I would like to think that it's easy, but working in a global company that is based over in maybe a different country that doesn't have the OFCCP and the alphabet soup that we don't really understand. Why do you want this on and why do you want this off? So I think that is a layer that I would probably have to tackle. It wouldn't be quick, but I don't know, Chad. I don't know how easy it would be. It's got me thinking that.
got data. Go get that data first. And Stacey, you're the last one. How easy would it be to actually execute on something like
well,
that?
you were just speaking areas of expertise, which, we're fortunate to have just a great and dedicated systems team that I partner with. And actually just before this conference, I had my weekly meeting with them on all of our open tickets. So I do think that it would be easy, but we did recently have an evaluation by one of our partners, and really the outcome of that, and terms of drop off and ease of application, that we just found that we weren't having sort of any major drop offs with applications. Also, I think the language and communications that you use as people apply are also very helpful. It can kind of get a spirit to the, like it can get, sort of the ethos of what you want to convey to the candidates and to let them know. And so you can have language that draws you in, and think about the communications all throughout the application process. And so we're experts on some things. Getting into the mind of the candidate, we're the expert at, and we rely on other experts on our team, of which we're lucky to have. So pretty easy, I would say.
Excellent. I would say that you're probably in the very small percentage that would say it would be easy to do it. But Crystle, Stacey, Trent, Jen, thank you so much for taking the time and having the conversation today. And again, thanks so much to the Recruitment Automation Conference, Wade and Wendy, Dave and team. We appreciate you having us. Enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy those llamas.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. Take care.